momentarily. Well, thanks everybody for joining. Welcome to Agri-Food Conversations, brought to you by iSelect Fund, the Van Trump Report, the Yield Lab Institute, and Family Farms Group. My name is Tom Bunn. I'm an associate on the iSelect Fund Ventures team, and I'm excited to welcome you all to our discussion today with New West Genetics. As many of you know, Agri-Food Conversations is all about driving innovation in ag. Each month we highlight a specific theme, and this month's theme is seed genetics and crop diversity. And as mentioned on today's call, we are joined by Wendy Mosier, the president and CEO of New West Genetics. New West Genetics provides the highest quality, most reliable proprietary hemp seed that reduces risk, increases yield, and enables sustainable large-scale production. Its technology combines traditional breeding using genomic-supported selection without using transgenic techniques, in other words, GMOs, proving that breeding hemp plants without using GMO techniques is achievable. With roots in agribusiness, genetics, and breeding, New West Genetics is solving the most pressing problems in the hemp industry while providing valuable options for the wider ag industry. Each of you knows companies are more likely to succeed with the right network of customers, talent, investors, and advisors. We've invited you to this call because you are some of the smartest, most talented people in New West Genetics market. You are potential customers for their products. You've built a company similar to New West, or you are a sophisticated business person or agriculture professional who understands the market and the challenges and opportunities that New West Genetics will inevitably face. Before we get started, we have a quick poll question to get a better idea of who we have on the call today. Please take a few seconds to answer. And a few process comments while the poll is running. We are not soliciting investment in any way. This presentation is to provide information to help New West Genetics find customers, mentors, or other strategic relationships that can help them grow their business. Secondly, you are all on mute. However, you can use the chat window to ask a question at any time. Finally, this presentation is being recorded and will be available for replay. So with that, and without further delay, I'm pleased to introduce Wendy Mosier, the president and CEO of New West Genetics. Take it away, Wendy.
Thank you, Tom. Hello, everyone. As Tom said, my name is Wendy. We are very grateful to be here today to present to iSelect and their network, even if it's only virtual. It's been a while since we've spoken to you all, and we've gotten a lot done. So my plan is to present for about 20 minutes and then have Q&A, as Tom mentioned. I'd like to get started with some market and regulatory points, and then move to what we've been up to in our breeding program. I am going to turn my camera off just during the talk because Comcast is messing around a little. So let's make it a little easier on that, and I'll come back for questions. So let's see, here we go. Oh, my PowerPoint is not moving forward. There we go. So I'm going to talk to you today about creating novel hemp varieties for new geographies and markets, principally in North America. This is a bold statement. New West Genetics is a global leader in a new row crop, but I truly say it with confidence now. Part of the reason for that was the opportunity to be able to start very early, which is key for breeding. We also had very strong competencies in these areas on the left that you see here. Our goal was to create premium proprietary hemp seed, as Tom said, that can give farmers another option of a sustainable and scalable row crop. I feel like I still have to do this, although I think 90% of America is aware now, but hemp does not intoxicate. The definition of it is a regulatory one. So it's the same species as marijuana, but you must have a genetic control over the amount of THC present, can't exceed 0.3%. And at this percent, of course, no one is getting high. So a very important point on this slide, which most of you are probably aware, was that in the 2018 Farm Bill, hemp was brought completely under the purview of the USDA, which was a huge advancement for the industry. So it's important to understand markets for a crop in order to establish a breeding program. So let's take a quick look at the markets that this plant serves. Because it is a multi-use crop, It addresses multiple markets, of course, and there's a lot of opportunity. We at New West believe grain is the largest opportunity. Here, this is showing the global protein market demand. And we know that out of that demand, there's an increasing consumer desire for plant-based proteins. And hemp is competing here with other crops, but it has some very distinct advantages that I'm going to get to. On the slightly smaller opportunities on the right here is, of course, you've probably heard of CBD. So there's that nutraceutical and pharmaceutical application from the flower. And then much advancement in the fiber realm is being made, particularly in China, to replace cotton with hemp, which there are many reasons to do so, especially around water usage. And then we're seeing burgeoning demand in the US, even this year, for US grown fiber. Let's take a closer look at why we believe the grain is the largest opportunity. Now, I know iSelect has done some work with Victory Hemp, and I'm sure they've talked about this amazing nutrition. We believe it is that hemp, our grain is the unsung hero of hemp. There is truly no other grain on the market that offers a package so complete. You should all be eating this and adding it to your diets. It's this particular combination of protein with fatty acids that makes it outstanding. So, sorry about that. All the same 9 essential amino acids as, soy, pea, but it has a better fatty acid profile. So this lipid profile and this ratio of omega-3s to 6s is the optimum that dietitians recommend. Now, you see grain products in the grocery store now, right, for human. It's widely commercialized. They've been on the market for about 10 years. It has, many of the molecules that are present in hemp seed has these, well-studied applications for health. Animal feed approvals have not happened yet. It's kind of the opposite of any other crop. So it's just due to prohibition. So I'm one of the steering committee members of Hemp Feed Coalition, and a huge advancement this year is that we submit applications to the FDA. It's called food ingredient applications for grain products. And this is the first year that we've been able to actually submit. We had enough data. We worked with the FDA to fill the holes. And we had enough data to show that it increases the omega-3 in eggs. So we expect that application to come through soon. And HFC is very well primed now to submit species by species, likely 1 a year. Hemp being hemp, there's more activity going on with it. So there's a number of people who don't want to wait, consumers. There are multiple states right now with legislation passed already or on the docket to allow use of hemp products in all kinds of animal feed, both on the companion side as well as consumption animals. So now that we understand kind of the markets and the traits, let's move on to genetics and breeding. I think the majority of folks in this audience probably are in ag and agree that breeding and genetic work accelerates value. So this is a depiction of corn yields, yields over time. So, key technology gains are highlighted here with these orange arrows, and those have corresponded with all of these yield jumps, right? Because of prohibition, there was a ton of work to do with hemp genetics. We like to say when we started, the state of US domestication was comparable to corn in the 1900s. So right around here. But because we have all of this technology already, we're able to make these improvements at such an accelerated pace. So we say it's, about 1970, 1980 right now. Building a breeding program, boy, we've learned a lot about this. It involves some very key considerations. The group on the left that you see here are more on the business side, and then the group on the right, of course, are on the science side. So, is there a market fit? Are you solving a need and demand? And as we discussed in nutrition, we believe we are. You must have a strong capital inflection at first because breeding takes years. So that's truly important. And then, your IP strategy has to be front and center and, a strong strategy from the start. You don't want to do all this work and then end up, with anyone and everyone being able to take advantage of your years of effort. And then, of course, on the science side, you're looking at what are the strengths of it, and then what are the targets? What do we want to improve to address markets? And regional fit also is highly important. And I'm going to discuss that a little bit more and how it relates to logistics and manufacturing, of course. And then if you're bringing a new crop in particular to market, you have to also bring agronomic learnings and research to your customers. So, the story of New West is that we had a number of those building blocks that you saw in that last slide. Truly, our story is half opportunity and half expertise. We're in the right place at the right time. We happen to be in Colorado when the 2014 Farm Bill authorized the R&D on hemp. It's important to note that no other state besides us in Kentucky allowed the growing of hemp right away. There were no sanctioned hemp breeding programs for a good 3 to 4 year period. And this is significant, right? For breeding, you're bound by biology and you have to wait through each successive generation. So it was a once in a lifetime opportunity to get a significant head start on our mission. Here's a picture of our team. We truly do have very wide breadth and deep experience in agriculture. There's over 150 years represented on our team. And importantly, a number of them have experience in bringing a new crop to market. So exactly what we're trying to do here in hemp. So when we started, these were the genetic sort of types I put in quotes that were on the market. So there was this feminized type where they only grow the females, they would kill the males, or they would clonally reproduce. These genetics stemmed from marijuana, yes, but they had been bred to put some controls over the THC for the purpose of just utilizing the plants for growing other cannabinoids, and of course CBD is the most popular. So you can see sort of horticulturally propagated, not a lot of agronomic traits for large scale production. So a lot of hand labor, costly seed, and it turns out when we've tested these, over 90% are not THC compliant. And of course it was all open source. You could go to any dispensary and buy this off of the counter. And then on the dioecious side, and dioecious means male and female plants are separate, and males create pollen. There were these, very well established cultivars from Canada and the EU, a number of certified varieties. They do this very dense planting style because they utilize mechanic production, right? Genetically stable and, for dual purpose. So mainly for grain and fiber. So our strategy was to combine all of those types, any of the types we could get our hands on. A good breeding program is predicated on variation. So, we knew we had to use database breeding to create the best performing varieties that we could. And there was immediate market demand. The challenge became establish ourselves as experts while putting in the long work that we knew was needed in order to put out a product. So keeping that attention, but also getting the work done. So our first directed target, of course, was to stabilize THC. We put compliance first, even though even today, a lot of the industry does not. And then combine the rest of those wonderful traits like the end use side with nutritional profiles, and then the agronomic sides with, maximizing yield in all of these different ways. So we employed very strong selection. We work and track anywhere from 14 to 20 traits that we type depending on the variety. And the goal is to also make it, fit for farmers. So breeding it for their existing equipment. So here's a picture. I mentioned the word dioecious, and this is a challenge for a breeding program. So again, males and females are separate, each on their own stem. You have to breed both sexes. Principally the products of use, the grain, the flour, and even sort of the most desirable fiber are sourced from the female plants. So the males are only there to pollinate. So as a result of that, over the years, we've maintained separate male and female lines and bred both of them. As you might imagine, controlling pollen is critical when you have this scenario, and especially in hemp because it's super small. It's wind pollinated, travels long distances. And this challenge is best addressed by utilizing, an isolation distance. So I'm sure some of you on the business side can imagine the operational challenges that go along with that, but we make it work. So, some of we have some key learnings, and that's what I'm about to go through right now. One of these key learnings sort of contradicted what was commonly accepted lore in the industry. So a particularly strong belief in the hemp world is that the cannabinoids will vary unpredictably and wildly by region, by light, by temperature, by anything environmental. We even saw hints, unfortunately, of that unsubstantiated claim in USDA's interim rule. There have been 2 published papers on these. It's called, when you're looking at genetics versus environment, G by E impacts, that have established that in well-bred genotypes, THC and CBD content are mainly controlled by the genetics, over 80%. This is fantastic news for the industry. It means that creating varieties that have stable cannabinoids across environments is very much possible. And we see evidence of that in the European and Canadian genotypes. It's likely, no fault of anyone, but it's likely this belief existed because there was very little effort to strongly select season over season on stability. It just hadn't occurred yet in the industry. So agronomic learnings, we certainly had many years of mistakes. We know a lot of what not to do, and then many more recent years of triumphs. So, no one knows it all in this species yet. You will learn a lot, even in your first year of growing. We try to impress upon our customers and partners to at least don't repeat the mistakes we've already made. We'll make more in unknown areas, but we collaborate closely and we encourage them to take advantage of the agronomic consulting we give to every single customer. We are there for them throughout the field season, and we share all of that learning with customers. And we've got very specific details under each of these, this list that you see here. So here, back to the genetics, this is called a PCA. This is sort of evidence of our capabilities. I don't want you to get confused or too worried about the details of the axes here. Basically, this is a 2-dimensional representation of a 3D model. So each axis represents a different slice of that data. Each dot is a sequence of a cannabis or hemp type. So blue is New West Genetics, and then green is public, so whatever is publicly available. We sourced every available published sequence of cannabis that we could find. This is a very small slice of New West Genetics' whole database, but it shows that we've created a number of unique and novel types, as well as possessing, similar types to what is out there. It's impossible to replicate this without an equivalent 7-year time investment. And we're going to do this. This is from a year and a half or 2 years ago. And we've had a really interesting project since then that we're going to add some data to this and see what it looks like next. So this is continually evolving. So, product pipeline. Last year was our first true year of commercialization. We have a robust breeding pipeline that has products rolling out, every 1 to 2 years, depending. So this top group right here are actual commercialized varieties. And under each type, there's a couple of different varieties. We label them NWG and then a number. The Abound varieties are multi-purpose. So they have enhanced CBD, they have awesome grain yield, and as well as some fiber applications. And then Elite is just dual purpose with fiber and grain. So, you can see the progress of a breeding company is continual improvement, right? So this is an Abound variety as well, but it has increased in better agronomic traits as well as content of CBD. Down below, these are traits that are currently being bred into new varieties. One of the most valuable traits that you see here is this gender skewed or hybrid trait. What this will do is basically double the yield of our current varieties, and it provides a path to a scaled hybrid system. And we can answer more questions about that at the end if you have some. So, as I mentioned, all that work would be for naught if you did not protect it. So we first filed back in 2015. We've been steadily building out our patent portfolio. We've been evaluated by many, famous international ag companies and have heard the comment it's the most comprehensive hemp IP portfolio they've seen. It's protective of what we've made, and it's also blocking to competitors. And this, in concert with that pedigree database, is what makes us a valuable acquisition product. So a quick comment on competitive advantage. People ask us, who are your competitors? We like to group them in two sort of categories. So category A would be, just like those genetic types, right, that were on the market. So genetics that have principally been bred for CBD content and that are replicated clonally or through feminized seed, which is done chemically, by the way. And then on the other side, it's these EU and Canadian grain varieties. So I'm going to go down these tabs now. Who of course who is able to get into the US and adapt their varieties to environments. It was really challenging for these folks to do so in the beginning. And so we've got a good 4-year head start on that. Who's breeding for mechanical harvest, of course, which enables scale. And then who has this expertise? I mean, really, the genomic side was never investigated in the EU or Canada in the first, 15 years or so of life of hemp being produced regularly. And then, of course, we've spoken about the IP and large scale and enhanced CBD. The folks in Europe and Canada are wonderful breeders, but they were unaware of the cannabinoids other than THC market. It really stemmed out of Colorado and exploded from there. So again, just the good grace of being in the right place at the right time. ASCA is a seed certification that validates your seed. Most farmers are highly familiar with what that is, and it's a good demonstration of the work that we've put in. So here's a picture of our field against a competitor field. I have lots of these. I just showed one. So here's New West. This is one of our abound varieties. It averages around 5 to 6 feet tall. You can kind of see the males here in yellow, and the females are these dark green, kind of thick bulbs right there, average 5 to 6 feet tall. What happened is there was a gold rush in hemp, and a lot of inexperienced operators came in, as well as poor genetics, right? Because they weren't advanced enough. There weren't experts in here working on it. And they would, sell them for unbelievable prices. So, if there's farmers out there, they'll say, oh, wait, is that the edge of the field? This is not the edge of the field. This is the middle of the field. It's just a crazy, inconsistent, things happening in this picture. And their yield was horrible. They couldn't, flowering time is hugely impactful. This obviously did not flower in time to be harvested and was killed by a frost. So back to the business side, how does New West work? We've got 2 basic products that we sell: seed, and then licenses to reproduce and resell our seed or our genetics. So, on the direct sales right now, the market is a size that we can handle within our own operations to make direct sales to growers. And we do some direct sales to strategic partners, although we like to do licenses more with them on that side. And then eventually, likely next year, we'll begin these agent seed sales, which is a very familiar kind of method in ag that other seed companies use. It's basically a commission. But the advantage is that we don't have to put an agronomist in every region, which is, it's pretty limiting when you're a small company. You find someone who's, really an expert in their region and has those farmer relationships, so they can provide support too for their farmers. And then on the licensing side, as I said, if we have a strategic partner downstream, we really like to be able to work on a license basis, because we want to continue to improve the product for them, right? There's, and you find out what they need by working with them over time. So we do this. And, it's also highly beneficial in new countries. So one of our wonderful licensees is in Canada, and part of what they do is navigate these regulations for us. Some countries are more strict with their seed regulations. Canada is one of those. So it's very beneficial to have someone familiar in those territories to enact the license for you. And then licensing specific genetic trait IP, we're very careful with this, but there's some sort of non-threatening entities that can utilize some particular genetic trait for their purposes, which is not competitive to New West's business. So as I said, 2020 season was our first year of commercialization. So if you look at these green little points here, those are trials and or sales. And I have the and or because sometimes we, we'll do a commercial trial with a farmer. So this is good to know on the business side, for all of you, but also, on the science side, as far as breeding for regional fit. So you remember I talked about that earlier as a building block of a good breeding program. So, exploring, which varieties fit where in concert with the developing manufacturing infrastructure. This was really hard. I mean, at first, there was no manufacturing infrastructure in the US, so we were kind of blind as far as where is this going to take off. We went with our guts and we went with where we saw the most enthusiasm, and we chose wisely, because it turns out that, of course, we needed something strong and stable in Colorado. And right now, we're the highest performing varieties across these states here in the Midwest. So we did a great job breeding for this latitude. And then we also needed to do work at the lower latitude as well as the northern latitude. So one science piece I didn't explain is that, hemp is highly influenced genetically by flowering time. So your yield rather is highly influenced by that. And flowering time is all about your latitude and light, right? So we knew we needed to go south a little bit because there's demand down here. And then we knew north, our Canadian brothers and sisters have been growing hemp for a long time. They were very interested in our, more cannabinoid enhanced varieties. And there's a ton of oil processing plants up here, right? So it just makes sense for us to move up there as well. So we've been up in Canada for a few seasons, and we've been down in the South for a few seasons too. So, in closing, one, here's my email. If anybody would like to get in touch with me, you can do so there. We're happy to open up for discussion. I do have John McKay on the line with us. If you have some very specific questions around the genetics, I didn't mention before, but John McKay is a professor of plant genetics at Colorado State University and one of my founding partners. So Tom, I will hand it back to you.
Awesome. Wendy, thank you so much for walking us through the presentation. And it's great to get an update. It's been a while since I've spoken to you guys, so it's good to talk to you. I guess you have your email here. The first question I like to ask is, how can this group of engaged food and ag professionals help you? So we have the folks on the call today, and this will be dispersed to a large number of people to watch retroactively. But how can the network help you?
I'm really appreciative that you asked this question, because I have three ways your network can help us. One is as, sort of beta testing of genetics. We have a 4x4 trial program this season. And I'm sure farmers that, like to do innovative stuff are familiar with, you're getting discounts in exchange for sharing data. In addition, we can help facilitate grain contracts with that. So if any farmers are interested in trying and working with us, and we'll share everything we've learned with you, we'd be happy to do so. Also, we'd very much love to go a little further down the supply chain and work with ingredient companies. So now that we have an array of finished varieties that are ready for commercialization, we have about 5, we would love to have ingredient companies test them. And it's pilot scale. It's very challenging. I was just at Future Food Tech and people were discussing how challenging that is when it's small scale. But we're willing to offer up to a certain amount of our grain for testing to see if it sort of suits their what their product ideas are. And then, of course, always investment. So yeah.
Great. Well, as a reminder to those in attendance today, to ask a question, you have a couple options. You can raise your hand on the sidebar and we can unmute you, or feel free to go to the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen and type in a question and we can read it out loud to Wendy. But Wendy, I guess to get things going, would be curious how you think your main business model will evolve in terms of kind of cannabinoids versus grain and fiber. Obviously, you have both bases covered, but what are you seeing the most traction in, and how do you think that will evolve?
It's Tom, that's such a good question. It's very volatile in a nascent market. I was very reassured when Renee Johnson from the USDA gave a talk at CSU's Hemp conference and said, this is normal for an emerging market. That made me feel better, but it still is like a roller coaster. Last year there was overproduction of CBD and everybody learned that, oh yeah, you really don't need that many acres, right, to fulfill what the CBD demand is right now. And we always have touted grain as the greatest opportunity. So we see, right now that, grain is the greatest opportunity. And we breed the, multi-use varieties so that farmers can at least have the option of, these sort of byproducts or these value adds. So, we certainly see that happening. And one other thing I have to mention about that is there's regulatory constraints still on the industry. And, I mentioned the one about animal feed and that's resolving itself, but still, FDA has been in the middle of, working through its approval of CBD as a dietary supplement and then as food and beverage. And we know large CPG companies are ready with their formulations, but they don't want to step in until the FDA gives its go ahead. They got a little distracted reasonably, right? So that has slowed down a little. And so what we see in the meantime for our business model, Tom, is really working closely with strategic partners. So who is going to be using our genetics, who needs our genetics, and getting it really fine-tuned for them for when, which we expect within 3 years, the FDA has granted its approval and the acreage can really begin to scale. So it kind of is a nice period of time for, the supply chain to create these relationships and work together to, raise all the boats, right?
Great. On the ingredient side, do you see yourself as getting into kind of the contract farming side and buying back supply from farmers to ultimately supply the processors and ingredient companies, or will your business end at kind of the genetics and offloading to the farmers?
It depends on the state of the ingredient maker and what their, sort of normal operations are. So we've done both. When you're in a nascent industry, it can look any which way because you have some ingredient makers that don't understand that whole part of production, and they want to. And we did start out, with the intention of doing that, but of course, through the years, we've gained relationships and learnings next to our farmers to be able to do that. And a lot of the time, these farmers of row crops aren't going to hemp conferences or food technology conferences. So we are making those relationships too. We've had to serve as, a biz development for the industry. So that is in one case with a license, yes, we do it that way. In another case with a license, no, they do their own seed production and sourcing. So.
Got it. And would you say, obviously your business model's still in development, as you've made clear, but as far as the farmers you have, would you say it's inbound, outbound, a mixture of both? And what's sort of the main, if I'm a farmer looking to get into this, where do I go for information, and how do I ultimately decide on choosing New West?
Well, I would say one place is I'm the chairperson of ASTA's Hemp committee, and we do sort of tri-monthly meetings that are open to ASTA members. So I know a lot of folks are members of ASTA. That's a good place to get information. It's tough, man, straining through all of the talk that's out there. So I would say find a trusted partner and go from there. Find growers who have had success, and work with them and learn from your neighbors who did not have success. There's no other way to do it right now, because I would say there's no other trusted source of information besides ASTA, as well as actually the university extensions. A lot of them are getting really up to speed very quickly, and doing a fabulous job educating their farmers.
Great. International, you mentioned Canada and China. I've read that Ukraine is also big in this market. Are you seeing any international demand, or are you wary there from a IP perspective, or how do you do kind of trans-ocean partnerships?
Yeah, it's a tough one that we struggle with still, Tom, because we have opportunities internationally constantly coming through. One thing I've learned is we don't, and we never did, but we investigated it and it was a waste of time. Going into countries that don't have their regulations on the books is too much effort. We can't do that much education, advocacy. It's way too much. It takes too long. So we do not do that. I give an immediate no when I get requests from countries that don't have regs on the books. We do have, through a risk mitigation strategy is in seed breeding is to have a contra season, right? So through looking for a good contra season, so something, a place where we can produce in the winter. If something happens, say hail hit a field in the summer here, we can go to the southern comparable latitude and bulk up seed. So because of that, we have relationships that now are sort of changing into a potential license. So we work in New Zealand with a wonderful contra season producer, and then we also work in South Africa with the same thing. And so those sort of happen naturally, not with the intention of licensing right away, but with the intention of building relationships. And they were trusted people that other of my colleagues in the company knew, and made the connection. So it's an evolving sort of strategic partnership in those places. But I want to be focused. It takes a ton of work to do this adaptation to as many different regions as we can, right? So I want to be focused for the next 2 years to get very solid with our southern tier genetics, very solid with these northern tier genetics, so that we can stand by our products and say we truly have the best genetics in these regions, as well as across the Midwest.
Great. Well, I've been monopolizing the questions here. I'll just pause for a moment to see if anyone in attendance has any questions. Well, I guess I'll have one more then, Wendy. So you obviously had a very strong 2020, all things considered. What do the next 12 to 18 months look like for you, and what are some of the key milestones you're looking to hit?
So we have, I mentioned that gender skew patent and trait, as well as, our THC0 trait. So, it's all about these trials and these breeding sites, getting data down to submit for those, as well as looking at the protein trait tracking. So it's R&D still. It's commercialization, within these regions that you see here. So just getting really tight with those two pieces in the next 12 to 18 months, we should have, about 2 more patents submitted, and we should have ongoing sales through that time too.
Great. Well, Wendy and John, thanks so much for joining us. To those in attendance, thank you all for joining us as well. As a reminder, we host these calls every Thursday at 3 p.m. Central. We have, I think, one more week of this topic here, seed genetics and novel crops. And we will get out the presenter for next week in the next day or so. Also, as a reminder, we do record these, so if you know anyone who might be interested in learning about what New West Genetics is up to, please direct them to agrifoodconversations.com. A copy of the recording, a replay of the recording, will be emailed to you, so feel free to share that as you see fit. Looks like we do have one question come in from Margaret. Margaret asks, Wendy, where is the most complete set of certified hemp?
Depends on what you mean by complete. The most complete set. So this could mean a few different things. So if you're talking about like broad use for hemp genetics across all three parts of the plants, New West has multiple certified varieties. So, the word certification means a very specific thing. You can go to AOSCA's website and see a list of all of the certified varieties of hemp. They've done a really fantastic job of educating the industry, but also, moving forward and analyzing, okay, how are we going to handle and do this, the right way. Oh, I see that. I see Margaret on the screen there. Hi, Margaret. So I would say that's where you find out, who's made them.
Good answer, Wendy. Thank you.
Hi.
I'll be back.
You.
Great. Thanks for the question, Margaret. And Wendy and John, thanks again for joining us. And to all the attendees, hopefully we will see you next week at 3 p.m. Central. And hope everybody has a great afternoon. Thanks again.
Thanks, Iceland.
Thanks.